Hey guys, welcome back to First and 10, the NFL football podcast here on Clueless Gamers. We're back, and we apologize once again. I'm getting like a broken record for getting together this late. We've missed a couple weeks here, but don't worry, we've been making our picks and keeping track and following each and every game, and hopefully delivering our interesting thoughts to you ladies and gents out there. As always on these podcasts, I am joined by my co-host Brian. Brian, how you doing at this almost 1 o'clock hour on a Sunday night?
Well, yeah, still awake, luckily, and what a day of football it was. I think this is the first time, maybe there was one other one that we did last year where we recorded on an actual football Sunday, but I think it's good because we can kind of recap everything that went on today, and what a day it was.
What a day it was is right. I mean, what a weekend. Even going back to college football on Saturday, it's been some kind of weekend for sports. You know, the boxing match was last night. There's been a lot going on, but we're here to talk about football. And so the last time you heard from us, we recapped weeks 1 and 2, and then we did picks for week 3. On Wednesday, we're going to record another podcast that's going to talk all about week 6, our predictions. I will let you know at that point where we kind of are in the win-loss column and how Brian and I are slugging through this season. We started off slow, and I think we're getting better with our picks here week to week. So we'll get all to that kind of stuff on Wednesday. In this episode, we're really going to talk about week 5 with a little bit of week 3 and 4 in there, discussing kind of the team's general trajectories of where these teams are going for the season. And at the end of this, we're going to preview the Monday night game tomorrow night with the Colts and the Ravens, so stay tuned for that. As always, there's timestamps down below for every game we're talking about, so if you have a favorite team that you want to click around to, always look in the description, click that little more box in the description, and you'll be able to find that. So with that out of the way, Bri, let's kick it to the 1 o'clock games, and actually, you know what? Let's kick it to the Thursday night game. I was going to save this for a little bit later, but, let's go in sequential order. And let's kick it to my Rams. Went up to Seattle. I know it might be a little hyperbolic to say that this was, kind of a must-win important game for the Rams. But I kind of felt that. I kind of felt that for both teams in some ways. But really the Rams reeling off of that very lopsided loss that they had at home to Arizona. Arizona beating them for the first time in about 5 years, the first time in the Sean McVay era. They're going into Seattle on the short week in that hostile environment, playing against the 12th man that they haven't been accustomed to in, give or take 18 months. I know there was some limited fans for the playoff game, but this was a packed house on a Thursday night game, and so dropping to 3-2 I thought would be very detrimental considering you have to keep pace in, I would say, the hardest division in football. And the Rams go into Seattle in a weird, strange game where so many strange things happen that we'll talk about and pull it out 26-17. Bri, if I ask you to quickly sum up what you thought of the game, what you saw, what would you say?
Definitely strange. I totally agreed when I saw your tweet. Is you always do a good job of kind of giving your recaps after each Ram game, and your line at the start was something like, honestly, what a strange game. And when I saw that, I was like, it really was. I mean, so many things, from Russell Wilson getting hurt and finding out that that's a long-term injury, which is obviously just a huge blow
Huge blow.
to the Seahawks. But the strangest thing of the game, and you might agree, I mean, there were a lot of things you could point to, but how about the Seahawks trying to punt twice on one play after initially having it blocked and then trying to kick it again? I mean, when I saw that, I was nearly on the floor. Like, that was one of the most bizarre things you could see on the football field. And so that, to me, just kind of summed up the night. But from the Rams standpoint, they did what they had to do offensively, and Stafford had an efficient day, and it wasn't big as far as throwing touchdowns. He only threw the one, but big day yardage-wise. And I think the big key was getting Robert Woods involved, because he had been kind of a non-factor in that offense, and he really went off in this game, 12 catches for 150 yards. So I thought that was a big key, and their offense did what it had to do, overcame some of the strange things, and got a key divisional win on the road.
No, I agree with you. The double punt, I guess, is where we start with that you talked about. First of all, officiating is always an issue, right? Every season, fans always have complaints. That's always something going on. But I really think particularly the officiating this year across the NFL has been very subpar, in my opinion. We saw, we'll get to the Chiefs and Bills game that just ended up in concluding. But in this game,
Yeah.
I just don't understand how the refs, their job on the field is to know the game and officiate it to the best of their ability. How do you not know the rule of what happened, because first of all, that luckily didn't impact the game greatly. It could have. And at that moment, I was losing my mind because it changed the field position completely. The rule is, if you don't know out there, ladies and gents, is that they added really like kind of a little bit of additive in the rules this year. And it basically says that the punter, whether you're behind the line of scrimmage or in front of course not in front of, but behind the line of scrimmage, you cannot re-kick and re-punt the ball twice. You can pick up the ball if it gets blocked, which it did in this case, and advance it. Any player on the kicking team can advance it, but you cannot pick it up again and kick the ball down the field. That is supposed to be a penalty of about 10 yards. That is what should have happened. Not only did they allow Seattle to kick the ball again, the kicker, the punter, was past the line of scrimmage. So either way that you want to slice this rule, there was no way that should have happened. And so now the ball, which should have been re-kicked, you back it up 10 yards, they would have been right outside their goal line. Even if it's a decent punt, it's probably going to about the Rams' 35, 40-yard line. Maybe you return it to the 50 because about Tutu Atwell or Cooper Kupp, whoever's back there, was averaging about 10 yards a punt. You're probably at the 50-yard line. You have a great chance of at least getting a field goal there, if not a touchdown, and I'm not one to theorize about that, but you're in a good shot to at least get a field goal. Now, the way they're able to keep the ball is now we had to go all the way back down to our own 15-yard line, and then that drive ends up being null and void and nothing happens, and you give all the momentum to Seattle, which they greatly needed at that point. It's an inexcusable error that as soon as the refs were all kind of gathering in a circle and how it was taking so long, I knew they had no idea what to call. They were not aware of the rule. They had no idea what was going on the field. And then you have the broadcast, the Fox broadcast, coming on with Mike Pereira outright saying the referees are wrong. That is not the way. Like, what a bad look for the NFL, where you have your quote unquote officiating expert on TV on a primetime game where it's a single solo game the entire country is watching, and he's saying the referees completely botched it. I mean, it was, in my view, disgraceful in the sense that is just simply not knowing the rule. It's not like, I could have went one way or another with the call. That's horrible, Bri. It's horrible, and it could have drastically impacted the game, and thankfully it did not. But I was losing my mind, let me tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it. And, look, you could go on and on about the officiating, as you brought up with the Sunday night game, which we'll get to, which was just a disaster. I mean, the game was hard to watch at times, and a game that coming in had a lot of hype, and rightfully so, with two what you thought were good teams. But we'll have a lot to say about the Chiefs, I'm sure. But going back to Thursday night, another strange thing from this game is Russell Wilson has the finger injury, forced out of the game. Geno Smith comes in. You think, oh, Geno Smith is just going to be a turnover machine. And he drives the team right down the field on like a beautiful drive. Yeah, it was like, who is this Geno Smith? This isn't the one we saw playing for the Jets for those years. But then, of course, when it mattered and they had a chance to drive for the tying score, he throws a very Geno Smith interception. And we're like, okay, that's a little more like it.
Yeah, Lockett slipped a little bit on that play. I'm just watching it right now. They tried to say it was a pass interference on Nick Scott. It absolutely wasn't. He ultimately ended up with the pick there. It was just kind of Lockett lost his footing. So it wasn't necessarily all Geno's fault there. But I think the turning point of the game is you have the punt having all that momentum. Geno drives it 98 yards. He gets Seattle back in, the crowd back in, and Matthew Stafford in the offense This is why you give up 2 first-round picks for Matthew Stafford. He had a kind of a great yards night, but I thought he missed some throws once again for almost his 3rd week in a row. The Tampa game, the Arizona game, and this game, there was wide open guys he was missing. He threw that ugly, disgusting interception in the end zone.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was trying to throw it away or what was happening, but there was almost no one in the area. He even called it after the game an idiotic and ugly interception. And to come back on the field, mix a little bit of the run, mix a little bit of the pass, and throw ultimately that touchdown to Higbee, that 13-yard score, that was the turning point of the game for me, because all the momentum was on Seattle. And then to turn it back and drive the entire field the way they did and silence that crowd, that's how you do it. That's how you're supposed to do it with all the talent that the Rams have on this field. And that's why you get a guy like Matt Stafford. You drive it 6 plays, 73 yards in just over 3 minutes like that. And that's something that we did not especially often see from Jared Goff. And I believe that for Rams fans, for myself and others out there, that's what calms your nerves a little bit. You feed Robert Woods, as you mentioned, which, there was some talk this week about, was he not getting enough catches, and was there any kind of dissentment in the room? And Cooper and Robert and all those receivers, they're all unselfish. They all love blocking. They're all for each other, and there's not a lot of ego in that room. But they clearly made a point to feed him, get him involved early, and he was just finding the gaps in the zone coverage for Seattle. So for me, that drive is why you got Matthew Stafford, and ultimately they were able to kind of distance himself a little bit, get a late field goal, and come out of Seattle with a much needed victory that the Rams had to have.
Yeah, I mean, that offense, as you know, it has a lot of weapons, and I think the added dimension, we haven't really seen a lot from Deshaun Jackson, but it seems like every once in a while he's good for a big play.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was on Thursday night. Again, that came at a key juncture, too, in the game, if I
68
remember
yards.
right. Yeah, and so to have that deep threat with Cooper Kupp catching the ball all over the place, I mean, he to me is like what Wes Welker was to the Patriots
Yes.
those years ago. Just guy you can throw bubble screens to, and he just makes plays all over the field. He's really become a star. But I think the Rams are really dangerous with that offense. The game that really stood out to me was the performance against the Bucks, where to me they beat them pretty soundly, and that was like, wow, this team could be Super Bowl material after watching that one.
Yeah, it was just concerning that, hey, Arizona is good. They are really good. And now getting beaten at home later in the season, going to have to go down to Arizona, and, we'll talk a little bit about them. But a weird game. Both QBs dealing with finger issues. Russell Wilson out 4 to 8 weeks, they're saying, because he ruptured a tendon in his middle finger when he came down kind of on Donald's arm. It seems like Donald and him always are having, issues, and they're always, torturing each other. Because remember, a few months ago, about 9 months ago in the January playoff game, Donald sacks Wilson. He kind of, Wilson, lands on his rib cage, and Donald ends up breaking a few ribs, and that was not nearly effective come the next week in the playoff game against the Packers up in Lambeau. So it was, unintentional, but it was kind of like Donald got Wilson this time around. And for a guy who has never, ever, ever missed a start, Wilson is going to miss the first games of his career. So Seattle seems right now to be a floundering franchise for at least this season, dropping to 2-3, and we'll have to keep an eye on, can Geno Smith keep them afloat going forward? I think it's going to be very, very difficult.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, let's switch over to the Sunday games, and we'll start in the early game. Your Jets, it's kind of how it worked out this week, that our teams are the first 2 games of this NFL week here in Week 5, and the Jets, they flew over across the pond, them and the Atlanta Falcons, and played at about 9:30 in the morning Eastern time in London, Wembley Stadium. Actually, no, it was Tottenham Stadium they played this time. It was a little bit different. And the Falcons pull out a victory there, 27-20. The Jets kind of got a late field goal, so it was kind of a really a 10-point game. The Jets, I thought, played a decent game. I didn't think it was bad. You know what this team is going to be, but still kind of disheartening with Atlanta without their top 2 receiving threats in Gage and in Ridley. They kind of relied on the tight ends, particularly this was a breakout game there for rookie Kyle Pitts that they drafted 4th overall. and Atlanta was able to get a much-needed win under the new direction of Arthur Smith. I mean, what was your take watching this game for your New York Jets?
Yeah, coming off a game where they actually won, which we know that's a rarity these days. Both New York teams last week getting wins. Of course, it takes overtime for both of them,
I
but
know,
hey, a
so
win's a
strange.
win. They'll take them, as desperate as those two teams are. But I thought the Jets actually had a chance to win this game because Atlanta we don't think too highly of. I mean, they played a little better in recent weeks, had the win against the Giants, certainly were competitive in the game against Washington at home, but it's not a very good team top to bottom. And I agree with you, like not having Calvin Ridley and some of the other weapons there on offense, I thought the Jets potentially could make some noise. And early on, they fell behind. They kind of played catch up, scored a couple touchdowns there, running the ball in the second half, but it's certainly not a performance that's going to overly inspire you as a Jet fan, I wouldn't say. I mean, Zach Wilson, I thought there were steps forward in the Tennessee game, really made some big plays, especially to Corey Davis. This was a game where the numbers, he was held under 200 yards passing with an interception, no touchdowns. So it's kind of what you would expect from the Jets, who are rebuilding. They're going to have a lot of these kind of games, and you just hope that the quarterback gets better as the season goes along and they can somehow muster a few victories. But today's, to me, was kind of what you would expect from the Jets.
Yeah, I really like their second half performance. They go down 23 to end the first half, and I thought they showed some fight there in the second half. It ultimately was not nearly enough, but there is some pieces there that I like. They got to get a little bit healthier. They obviously need to go through another draft class and free agency class, I think, to even remotely be competitive. Probably two, to be honest. But I really like the Robert Saleh hire. I think that they're going in a decent direction, and the point is that I'm seeing improvement in this team. I had a feeling that coming off of the big emotional win that they did in overtime against Tennessee last week, there'd probably be a little bit of a letdown. Going across the ocean to London, I'm never really a fan of those games. I understand the NFL is trying to get NFL football ultimately more popular in Europe and maybe even a team or two be there. I just don't see how that would work in the long run. But so I'm not a huge fan of those games, but there was some progress. But the Falcons, I think they demonstrated in this game, even going against the hapless Jets, that they should be a lot better than they are. It's just for some reason, especially defensively, they cannot get it together. And Cordell Patterson, for me, has been kind of this breakout, weird career year he is having because drafted in the first round way back years ago of Minnesota, fails as the wide receiver, the star wide receiver they wanted, long before Adam Thielen broke out or Justin Jefferson was even on the scene. And then he kind of bounces around. He's a kick returner. He's pretty good there. And now he's kind of this like hybrid of kick returner, running back, wide receiver. And he's having probably his best year, I would say, in Atlanta. I mean, look at today. 14 carries out of the backfield, 54 yards, 7 catches for 60 yards on 9 targets. Like, he was kind of just doing it all. Even a kickoff return he had as well for 29 yards. So he kind of seems to be their gadget Swiss Army knife there in Atlanta. And I want to see more. I believe in the offensive mind of Arthur Smith. And I need to see more from Atlanta because I believe in the NFC South, besides the Bucs, there is room there to be that kind of second team, and they just don't seem to be living up to their potential.
No, but it is good to see the rookie tight end who was drafted so high. I think, what was he, the
Fourth.
highest picked
Yeah.
tight end in history
Yes.
there with Pitts, and as you said, been kind of a slow start for him, but to have his breakout game, maybe that kind of gets him going. That could potentially ignite the offense, especially if they get Ridley back healthy. And then I think they can do some things offensively. We know defense, they leave a lot to be desired. So I think it's going to be kind of a long year for Atlanta.
Yeah, most likely. Going over to maybe the most heartbreaking team so far, and probably in NFL history, the Detroit Lions went into Minnesota, and you know what? I'm going to stand up for the Lions here a little bit, and maybe that's just because I'm trying to pull for Jared Goff, but this team, for the most part, in some way, either half or the whole game, has been in every game this season. Like, they have just been there, and they have been fighting their tails off. It just seems like they are always snake bitten. Like, they're getting blown out by the Niners, and they have a chance to kind of tie that game at the end, and then just can't make the final play after the Niners were trying to choke that game away. They have the Ravens, played a great defensive game against Lamar Jackson, and it takes a record-breaking field goal that bounces off the center crossbar to beat them there. And now in this game, they get a fumble. They get the ball inside the 30 or 25-yard line. They score a touchdown. They take the risk and go for the 2-point conversion instead of the tie to take the lead. They get it. And they still give it up with like 37 seconds left, where Greg Joseph hits a 54-yarder. Kirk Cousins did a great job managing the offense and getting them down the field. And they lose a heartbreaker. And we see head coach Dan Campbell of the Detroit Lions. He cried. I don't know if you saw that a little bit after the game. He shed some tears about how much he loved his team and the effort that they were be giving. And you know what? I can't help but feel bad for them, because they really are playing. They're not a super talented team, and they are really playing their tail off. And I mean, what'd you make of that game of two division opponents? You knew it was going to be close, but ultimately Minnesota is able to pull it out in 1917.
Yeah, there were a lot of crazy finishes. It was a good day if you watch Red Zone, because the amount of games that went down to the wire. And I think I saw Adam Schefter tweet that this is like a record number of games that have had a game-winning score in the last minute through 5 weeks, like all time. Yeah. So it's just been a great start to the season. But for Detroit, I like the decision to go for the 2, because it's like, you're winless. What do you got to lose?
Exactly.
Just go for the win there. And like you said, they get the 2-point conversion, and then the defense allows Minnesota to get into field goal range. I mean, it was a long field goal. It was a 56-yarder that it took to beat them.
I think it was 54.
And like you said, it's 50-plus yarder.
Yeah.
Right. And like you said, it's just with the Lions, they just find ways to lose games, and nobody thinks this team is any good, but to see the fight that they've had this year has been impressive, and I think will eventually lead to some wins that maybe you don't expect them to get, because they're kind of developing their character with these kind of games.
Yeah, and I think the defense, it's just the story of them, right? The defense plays a relatively pretty great game. Kirk Cousins didn't go off. Jefferson got 124, but after that, Thielen had 2 catches for 40 yards. Madison is the one that kind of broke their back a little bit, filling in. He's one of these players where he might be the best, maybe the second best backup running back in football. It might be him and Kareem Hunt, honestly, because he is like so much like Dalvin Cook. They have very similar running styles. They almost look exactly the same, and they just do the same things for this offense that it's a very plug and play, and he had a fantastic game, but it ultimately is him that ends up costing the team the win, and still they're able to bail him out and pull it out there at home in front of the home crowd there in Minnesota. And it's just, I just can't feel anything but just sadness for Detroit of what they're going through. But they're showing grit, they're showing fight. They have some injuries as well, and maybe they'll pull out a couple victories before the end of the season, but just another heartbreaker there for them. Going over to Washington, the Saints visited the Washington football team, who has kind of been a disappointing team for me, I'd say, through the first 5 games of the season, especially particularly on defense. And they had a little bit of a pass rush in the last couple of weeks, including this game. They were getting home a little bit. But the Saints, who have been such a flip-floppy team of one week they show up and they're fantastic, the next week they're absolutely dreadful. Winston, we saw this a couple times this week. Winston has a 50% completion percentage. He goes 15 for 30, yet he throws 279 yards and 4 touchdowns. So it was just a weird game for a lot of teams, just throwing Hail Mary, deep bombs, deep, big plays happening on the field, and they got Kamara involved, which I think has been a lacking thing for their by far most explosive weapon on offense. They've not really got involved to the degree that he needs to be involved in this offense this season, and this felt like, for me, the first game of the year that, hey, 5 catches, 51 yards and a touchdown, 16 carries for 71 yards and the touchdown on the ground. It felt like they were getting him involved. And then, hey, it doesn't help. It doesn't hurt to get a few breaks there. You had the Harris touchdown before he got hurt. You get the Callaway bomb at the end of the first half. and New Orleans was able to pull it out 33-22. They kind of broke away there in the fourth quarter. I mean, Brian, two teams here that are confusing week to week. I mean, what'd you make of this game?
Yeah, I really couldn't agree more because you think about this Saints season, they start with the blowout against the Packers on the neutral field there, and they're playing in Jacksonville, and you're like, oh, wow, maybe the Saints are going to be really good. They're going to stomp Carolina the next week. Then they get blown out in Carolina. Then you think, okay, they're going to New England. They're going to lose that one. Well, no, they beat the Patriots. Then they come home and play the Giants. You say, oh, please, the Giants, no chance. And the Giants beat them in New Orleans.
With 11 fourth quarter points.
Right. So just about every game, I feel like you get the Saints pick wrong because when you think they're going to play well, they don't, and vice versa. But this to me was a game that was going to be kind of a flip of the coin game. Maybe I give the slight edge to New Orleans. Washington's defense has been kind of disappointing. I thought they were going to be one of the better units, but it takes the fifth game of the season for Chase Young to get his first sack. I mean, that to me is a big surprise. And obviously, they're on the backup quarterback there with Heineke, with Fitzpatrick's injury. Terry McLaurin, I think, is a great weapon at wide receiver. I mean, he's just terrific. But yeah, this game was kind of indicative of the way the two teams have played, where you didn't know which way it would go, and Winston's kind of bombing the ball all over the place. I think the Hail Mary before the half was really the key play because those kind of plays are tough to recover from, especially a Washington offense that isn't overly explosive and playing with a backup quarterback. I think that really kind of turned the momentum of that one.
Yeah, and you say backup quarterback, which, yes, that's what Heineke is. But honestly, is it that much of a downgrade or anything to Fitzpatrick? I mean, they're very similar in the sense that they can run around. They're kind of gunslingers. They can kind of be a little bit wild. And that's the problem for Washington that's going to hold them back because they really need to solve that QB spot legitimately. Could they do that in the draft? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a fantastic draft class coming out here, at least not compared to the last 2 or 3 years. And then for the Saints, Harris goes down after that long touchdown he has. He's injured. They're still waiting on Michael Thomas to come back. There's some injuries there where, hey, if they get some pieces back, could New Orleans give the Bucs a threat? I don't think so. They're just too flip-floppy week to week, and I think it's going to be 2 odd seasons for those teams respectively. And I could see them upsetting some teams that they shouldn't, and then I could also see them getting completely blown out because they're just too inconsistent for my liking. Another team,
yeah, probably headed for a 9-8 kind of season.
Yeah, that 8-9.
That's what I would say.
I agree.
Yeah.
Another team that both of us in our preseason picked to go to the playoffs is the New England Patriots, and they went over to Houston and they played them. And this game, Brian, was a little ugly, and I would say that early on, for most of the game, man, it was looking bad for Bill Belichick's Patriots. They were down to the Texans. I think at one point, what was it, like 22-7 or something like that? It was getting incredibly ugly. And then the Texans make this weird play where they're about to punt the ball, and they try to draw New England off sides, so the punter comes down into under the center. He then backs up, and then all of that motion ends up getting the punt not blocked, but it kind of hits off the side of his foot, and it was a really terrible punt. And that seemed to be the momentum changer where the Texans never scored a single point after that, and it was all New England, and they come back, and Mac Jones leads them to a victory. So I thought that was a really poor choice on the Texans and David Culley's part of you're up, you're leading, you're at home. Why risk anything with some of these trick kind of plays against Bill Belichick and give the Patriots any type of momentum? And then in the end, where Mac Jones down 4 offensive linemen, going through some struggles, he's a rookie QB. I thought down the stretch there in the second half, particularly the fourth quarter, he was very impressive, Bri.
Yeah, this was an interesting game. Early on, like you said, it did not look like it was going to be the Patriots' day. And if they had lost to the Texans, coming off some of the other losses they've had, we know last week it was against Tampa, but it looked like it potentially could be a long season for the Patriots. And the way Davis Mills was slinging the ball around the field early in this game, receivers we've never even heard of for big, long plays. It was like, what is going on here? but then the Patriots were able to scratch and claw their way. There was a key play in this game that I want to see if you saw too, because it was a ruled a touchdown by Damian Harris, and
Yes.
they wound up overturning it, and the ball looked like it had crossed the plane, but they ruled that he fumbled short of the goal line. You probably saw it. I thought it was a touchdown. I was surprised that they took it off the board.
Yeah, this is another one where there's been weird officiating this season, and definitely, particularly this week here in week 5. I thought he crossed the plane. I thought he was in.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know. There's week to week, it's just rules I feel like just change based on who the crew is or where the game is being played. It just feels like there's not a lot of consistency this season, and that was a big killer that didn't end up sealing the Patriots' fate, but Davis Mills, they all game they were talking about, as they always do, Bill Belichick's record against rookie QBs and blah, blah, blah. And as they're saying all this, I'm watching this man hit flea flickers over the Patriots
Hmm.
secondary. There's two guys, I forget, one of the corners and one of the safeties for the Patriots, that they catch the ball and they stare at each other as the Houston receiver runs past for a huge touchdown. Like, it's like they were completely out of position and had no idea how to tackle. I mean, it was just, I thought, not a great defensive performance from the Patriots, and particularly the calling of Bill Belichick there. It didn't look great, but Mac Jones and the offense were able to bail them out in the end. And I thought last week he was very impressive in a rain-soaked game, in an emotional game against the Tampa Bay. He throws that ugly interception early, and then he kind of settled down and gave them a chance to, kick a game-winning field goal there before Nick Folk missed it. And then to come back today, that's the kind of progress I need to see. Now, this team might be a little bit off the mark than either of us kind of thought. I don't know at this point if they really honestly are going to be a playoff team. I don't think anyone in the AFC East beside the Bills are going to be. But at least they were able to snuff out a win here against the Texans, because that would have been absolutely disastrous.
Yeah, overall, I have not been impressed by the Patriots. If you were to ask me right now, do they make the playoffs or miss the playoffs? I think we would both say
Yeah.
miss the playoffs.
Yeah,
So,
it's not looking pretty. There's a lot of growing pains going
no.
on up there in New England. Speaking of New England and the man who did it over there for about 19 years, the Miami Dolphins went down to Tampa. Not that far. They're chilling in. It's one of the state games there that you have going. It's kind of when the Chiefs used to play the Rams back in the day before they moved to LA. And the Dolphins are one of these teams that both of us on the opposite side of the AFC East were both not high on coming into the season. We've seen a lot of quote-unquote experts before the season very high on the Dolphins. I understand, and I do like Brian Flores down there in Miami, but I thought ultimately they had a huge issue, the biggest issue you could probably have in professional sports, and I don't trust it. I don't think either of us trusted their QB. And look, Tua's been out. They got Brissett kind of filling in there, and their offense has been completely lackluster. And they were early in the game here against the Bucs, and then Tampa Bay took it to them. Tom Brady with his 9th career game of 5 touchdowns or more. I said to someone today, I actually thought he would have had more games in his career, considering he's been playing for 75 years. I would have thought he would have had more games of 5 touchdowns or more. But he was fantastic, 30-41, 411 yards and 5 touchdowns. He also threw in a 13-yard run for a first down that I saw during the game, and so that was his longest run this season. So he was very impressive. And then anytime you could bring in the backup QB, you're blowing a team out, as Blaine Gabbert got in there at the end of the game. Antonio Brown went off, Evans went off, Godwin was great. But I think the story is what's falling apart down in all the progress that Miami has made in the last couple of years. And hey, it means nothing. The NFL shows you once again, it means nothing in team building if you do not have a quarterback.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, I think Miami eventually, maybe not this year, but I do like the direction that they're heading in with this regime. Like, I think Brian Flores is going to have them competitive before long. I mean, this year they've had their issues with the quarterback injury, and we don't know what Tua is, which is also an issue. But from a Tampa perspective, the one problem with them is the amount of injuries that they've sustained on defense. I mean, today it didn't really matter because the game was a blowout, but
Yeah.
they've had some games this year where their defense has been leaky, to say the least. And we know they're going to score points, and today their offense looked like a well-oiled machine. I mean, how about the fact Antonio Brown? I mean, this may not be Pittsburgh Steeler Antonio Brown, but I think there was a time where we thought he might be out of football. And so to see him
Oh,
come back and
absolutely.
have this kind of an impact, I think has given that offense a big lift.
Yeah, he's clearly a favorite target of Brady. Brady wanted him in the building, and he really took off today. I mean, hey, it's hard to say a guy if he's staying in shape and he can get himself right, his mind right off the field. He was, for years, undoubtedly the best wide receiver in football. The stats back it up. The game tape backs it up. And to now see him come into his own there in Tampa once again and kind of possibly have a rejuvenation as long as Tom Brady is down there, I won't go as far as say nice to see, just because I don't agree with a lot of his off the field antics and issues that he has had with the law. But as a player, I've always supported him, and I always thought he was a fantastic football player. And he makes them dangerous. It's just defensively, as you alluded to, that secondary, even when it is healthy, is not that great. And considering that they've been down at sometimes to their fourth and fifth corner, that's where you can exploit that team. We've seen the Rams do it. We've seen a few teams this season do it, and even dating back to last year. So that's something that you have to keep an eye on. But, hey, as long as Brady is slinging it, the second year in that offense, they look better than ever. And, I mean, Tom looks like he's a 25-year-old out there. I just don't understand how he does it.
It's just mind-boggling. I mean, when he says that he wants to play till he's 50, who would doubt him? I mean, there just should
I'm
be
done
no
doubting
doubting
him.
him anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, my thoughts coming into the year, I went kind of out on a limb and said they weren't going to win the division. I regretted that pretty quickly. I mean, I don't think this is a flawless team by any stretch, but certainly, they look potent, especially on offense, and Brady showing no sign whatsoever of slowing down.
Yeah, that offense is absolutely scary. Going over to Cincinnati, in maybe, Bry, the weirdest game of the week, in Green Bay going to Cincinnati. Green Bay pulls out the victory in overtime,
Yeah.
25-22. Both quarterbacks, I thought, Burrow and Rodgers especially, were great. Aaron Jones on very limited carries. He averaged 7.4 yards a carry today. Devontae Adams, you knew after last week he was pretty quiet against the Steelers. You knew this man was just going to eat. He goes 11 for 206 and a touchdown. It was just one of those things, Bri, like, I know you know what I'm talking about, where you could just feel it. Like, you feel they were going to feed him and he was just going to rip apart the Bengals. And, hey, you know what? The Bengals, they dropped to 3-2, but I don't know your opinion, and I kind of want to hear it here. I think they've been overly impressive, and they are a dangerous team, I think, to at least play spoiler or be on the outside fringes of the playoffs if they stay healthy. I mean, do you think the same way with the Cincinnati team, or do you think it's all fool's gold?
No, I think I've been impressed with what I've seen from them. I think the one big key is keeping Burrow healthy and not having him take as many hits as he has. I mean, at one point in this game, it looked like he was going to be knocked out, and then he winds up staying in and throwing that bomb to Chase. So what a connection he's developed with the rookie wideout. But then we hear too that after the game he goes to the hospital because he has a throat contusion. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the one thing with Cincinnati is I'm worried about this offensive line protecting the franchise
Yeah, it's
quarterback.
bad.
If they can keep him upright, I mean, he has weapons all over the place. They're going to score points. They're an up and coming team. I know you know Zach Taylor well from being on the Rams coaching staff for all those years. I think he's really got something going well there. And when you have the franchise quarterback who's only getting better, you have a lot of promise. So I think there's a lot to like about Cincinnati.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. I really like those defensive acquisitions that they've added. Awuzie and Trey Hendrickson got a sack again today. I love what they are doing there. They have DJ Reader as well. Von Bell is a very underrated player, I think, at the safety position. I think he is actually absolutely fantastic. But ultimately, it's going to come down to, as exactly as you said, is Burrow's health. And you know what? It's not only the offensive line, Bry. It's also Burrow has to stop playing as reckless as he is. I understand he has some mobility. He's a playmaker. He's a gamer. I would love him to be on my team. But that one shot, I don't know if you saw this. I think it was it was in the second half. It was before overtime where he was running out and he kind of got top-ended where he got hit at the bottom of the top. Thank God his legs kind of didn't catch in the turf and they came up in the air. But even the way he landed on his head, they had to evaluate him for a concussion, and then he was able to come back in the game. He's got to cut those plays out. I understand the knee is a risk, but he has to learn how to slide properly and not put himself in dangerous situations, which are ultimately going to hurt his football team if he's not out on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And just quickly on this game, because I think the big story, in addition to what Devontae Adams was able to do and different players who had big stat lines, was the fact that nobody could kick a field goal in
Holy
this game.
God. Have you ever
I
seen
mean,
anything like that?
no, the amount of missed kicks at the end of this game into overtime, Mason Crosby seems to go through these spurts where all of a sudden he just can't kick. But the Packers, the one consistent thing is they always stick with him. I mean, he has been there for a long time and he's been through some ups and downs, but they have been loyal to him all through the years, and he usually does reward them. And look, this game, he finally kicked the game winner, 49 yards in overtime after all the missed kicks earlier. Cincinnati missed multiple kicks. So, I mean, it was all over the league. The kicking was just atrocious today. But none worse than in this game where you just wondered who was finally going to put the final points on the board, and eventually it was Crosby in overtime.
Yeah, I mean, 5 straight missed kicks. Horrific. I mean, horrific. McPherson, the young rookie kicker there out of my Florida Gators, he goes 0 for 2, but he nails both his extra points. He had 2 chances to win the game. He failed. He actually thought that he won it. The Bengals players were celebrating. They thought they won the game, and ultimately the ball just went over the left upright and hit the flag, but was out. But they didn't know that for about 15 seconds or so. And then Crosby missing 3 in a row, missed an extra point, which put them in that situation to be tied in the first place. And when he missed, I'd say the second one, I was like, oh no, you could just feel like something was there. And so when he kicked that third one right before it, I was like, he's going to miss this one too. Like, that's just how it happens. It's sometimes he gets into these stretches. Kickers can get into these stretches. And you look at his stats, he's 1 for 2 in the extra points. He made 4 field goals. So you go, wow, what a great day. He had 7 attempts today. Like, you don't see
I did not even
like
realize he actually had 4 makes.
Yeah, you just do not see a kicker get 7 attempts and to miss 3 of them, and he still made 4, and he ultimately gets the game winner in overtime, where they kept sticking with him, and I thought that was very important to keep up his confidence to, when they have it in field goal range, to not just go for it. They allowed him to keep taking his chances, and then he nailed it right down the middle to end the game. But what a strange game and an embarrassment from the kicking department. I'm sure Pat McAfee and Adam Vinatieri will have something to say about that tomorrow, because that was scary. Going over to Pittsburgh, and here's 2 teams where I think both of us did not have a lot of faith on. And I think we've both been pretty consistent on that. But, if I'm wrong, you could correct me. In the Pittsburgh Steelers, we didn't think really highly of this team at all. They have this weird game in week 1 where, with the penalties that were being called and just a strange defensive game, they were able to pull it out against Buffalo in Buffalo. Never won a game since. And then they're hosting Denver, who started off 3-0. And there were so many people high on this Denver team. And I love a lot of their pieces, but I will always come back to whether it's Bridgewater or Locke. They're not dynamic enough at the QB position to do anything. And of course, yes, they've had some injuries like the rest of the league, but they played the Jags, the Giants, and the Jets to get those 3 wins. And now, in back-to-back weeks, you've seen what the Broncos really are. And they kept it a little bit close there. They tried a fourth-quarter run, but it just wasn't enough. And finally, we saw a decent sighting of Chase Claypool in this game, and Pittsburgh was able to run the ball a little bit. Najee Harris getting 122 yards, a huge game for him, probably his best game in his young career, in his 5th game of his career, and they pulled it out. So I don't still think highly of either of these teams, but what'd you make of this game, Bry?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain teams that when they're at home, it's hard to go against them, and to me, the Steelers are one of those teams. So even though Denver came in at 3-1 and Pittsburgh at 1-3, you and I both had Pittsburgh in this game, and the game was never really in doubt. The Steelers got a quick strike to Deontay Johnson early on that kind of set the tone. I think that was really big for the Steelers because Roethlisberger had been taking a lot of heat for really not playing good football at all. And so to see him hit one of those big plays, to me, the Steelers' offense should be a lot better than it's playing. Like, it's not like they're bereft of weapons.
No,
Like,
it's
the
Big
young
Ben. It's
running back looks like he's going to be a player. You still have Juju Smith-Schuster. We'll have to see about his injury situation going forward. Claypool, as you mentioned, big game today. So I feel like this team can still put up points. And Roethlisberger, we know he's getting up there in age, but you can't completely count them out. But I'm with you. I don't have a whole lot of trust in them, especially in a division where you have Baltimore, you have Cleveland as well as they're playing. And as we talked about with the up-and-coming Bengals, I just don't think there's a lot of room for the Steelers to make much noise.
No, we already seen the Bengals come in to Pittsburgh. They already pulled that one out, and it all has to do with Big Ben. I mean, Big Ben is just, in my opinion, and I think a few people's opinions, he's at the twilight of his career. I kind of think it's over. I think they should have moved on when they were kind of flip-flopping back and forth, and he only came back at a massive pay cut this season. And they're going to be looking for a QB. I don't think Dwayne Haskins is going to be that guy that they have backing him up. But, we've seen them go with a couple options. They drafted Mason Rudolph, and then he kind of didn't work out. They're going to be searching for a QB in the offseason. Or, hey, we're not going to talk about it a lot tonight, but there was a lot of rumors this week swirling about Aaron Rodgers possibly to the Pittsburgh Steelers after this season with his overwhelming praise of Tomlin, and he kind of like winked at him last week in the game, and they seemed to be smiling about something. So there's probably something going on there that we don't know, but that's something to keep an eye on as we go forward throughout the season and particularly into the offseason. We go into Carolina, and the Eagles went in there. They pulled out a shocking victory, I would say, there. And for me, Brian, maybe you'll take the Philadelphia side of that, but for me, it's the Panthers because they're very, very much like the Broncos for me, where this was another team a lot of people were high on, 3-0, flying high. They go into Dallas. They kind of, for the most part, the score got a little bit closer than it actually the game really was. They kind of got the doors blown off them there from the mid-second quarter on after the game was like 14-all. And then they have this game easily in hand against a Philadelphia team that they should be way better than the Philadelphia Eagles. And they give this game away. I mean, they got some lucky breaks where they fumble it in the end zone, and they should have been able to fall on the ball for a touchdown, but they only get a safety out of it. And then they allow Jalen Hurts to get back in the game with just Sam Darnold just having a horrific game, just making some ugly, ugly choices, throwing 3 picks. He threw 2 last week in Dallas, so now 5 picks in the last 2 weeks. I just think, I don't know if it all has to do with Christian McCaffrey, because I thought Chuba Hubbard, he comes in, 24 carries, 101 yards. I thought he filled in really nice, Bry, 5 catches, 33 yards. They just couldn't get DJ Moore and the rest of the offense involved, and it all came back to your old quarterback there in New York, Sam Darnold. He was just bad.
Yeah, well, what we saw in his years with the Jets is that he's mistake prone at times, and I think people just thought, oh, the change of scenery and how the season started for Carolina, that he was just going to go on to this magnificent season. And while I think he will probably play improved football compared to what we saw with the Jets, I think there are going to be some games like this where he has some turnovers because that's who he is as a quarterback. And yeah, like you said, McCaffrey not being there, but that didn't really matter because Hubbard stepped in and played well. Early on, their defense was completely stymieing Philly. I mean, they at one point just had nothing going offensively. Hurts had like negative passing yards through like the first quarter.
Yeah, it was
And then finally, they made some plays in the second half to win. So, I mean, there's a few teams that we talked about, like started 3-0, the Raiders, or another one, Denver, as we talked about, and you think, oh, maybe this is going to be a year where they are playoff contenders, and all of a sudden, all 3 of them have lost now the last 2 weeks, and we have a lot more questions about them than we did earlier on.
Oh, absolutely. We'll talk more about the Philadelphia Eagles on Wednesday because they're playing the Thursday night game in Tampa, so Jesus, good luck there. But definitely a vote of confidence for them to come back and win this. I think Hurts had something like 37 yards or something in the first half. There was a point where they had 2 first downs on the first drive and then didn't until like the end of the second quarter. I mean, it was ugly, but Carolina could just not take advantage and distance themselves. And, it's considering that they could have been a team there that at one point was in first place a couple weeks ago when my Rams beat Tampa and they dropped to 2-1 and Carolina was 3-0. And now I'm wondering, hey, when those two teams meet at some point, I think Tampa Bay is going to throttle them. So we'll keep an eye on a lot of these fool's gold teams and see where they end up. And I'm sure in future podcasts, we'll be talking about, remember when blah, blah, blah started 3-0, and then, we'll look at where they are at the end of the season. But an ugly, ugly loss that they had there in front of their home crowd. Speaking of ugly teams and ugly losses, once again, we go over to Jacksonville. And the Titans really thromped them 37-19. Jacksonville tried to keep it a little bit close. They're just not that team, and we don't have enough time, I think, tonight, Bri, since it's late. Maybe we could talk about it on Wednesday to talk about whatever the hell is going on there with Urban Meyer and his odd, strange, incredibly inappropriate behavior. We'll save that for Wednesday. But I had a feeling that and the Gruden stuff, and we'll get to that Las Vegas game, that when you have issues going on with the head coach, it kind of hangs over like a dark cloud over the team. And also throw in that you're not a good football team going against a better division rival. And the Titans just took advantage. I don't think Tannehill this season in general has been that impressive. He's 14 for 22 today, 197 and a touchdown. There's nothing crazy there. But they've relied on Derrick Henry. He came, I don't know if you saw this stat, Bri. He came 20 yards short. He rushed for, 130 yards, 3 touchdowns in this game. Fantastic game. But if he rushed for 150 yards, he would have been the first player in NFL history to rush for 150 or more yards in 3 straight road games. So he came 20 yards shy of that. So unfortunate that he couldn't make some NFL history, but he's still having an absolutely fantastic season after that week 1 kind of slow start in the blowout that they had against Arizona. But hey, this team gets A.J. Brown, back to more of a healthy state. He played today, but he clearly seems like he's not at 100% strength. Julio Jones still out as he was injured in this game. Tennessee could get scary as they get rolling here if they could really get this defense, flying around. And Jacksonville becoming the 3rd team in NFL history to lose 20 or more straight games dating back to last season. It's getting really ugly down there in South Florida.
Yeah, it's yikes, I think is the best way to put it. And I'll bring it up right from the top here that I'm regretting picking Jacksonville in this game. Just for whatever reason, I took a shot and picked the Jaguars. When you saw that, you probably thought I was completely nuts, and it turns out I was. So, regretting that, but you know what? For Tennessee, the division is right there for them. I mean, this division is abysmal right now. With Indianapolis playing as poorly as they have, Houston is one of the worst teams in the league. So, I mean, Tennessee's got to win the division just by default, even if they're not as good as they were last year. And I think they will get stronger as the year goes on once they get more of the weapons there, the pass catchers for Tannehill. I think Julio Jones is going to make his mark at some point this year. He hasn't yet, but he's too good of a player to be silent. And, of course, the last couple of weeks hurt. But so to me, Tennessee is still dangerous, and that running game is just absolutely lethal. And Derrick Henry, talking about what he's done in his career, it seems like half of those crazy games have come against Jacksonville. I mean, he has just eaten alive the Jaguars, who, when you watch them at Jacksonville, cannot stop anybody on defense. I mean, that defense is just atrocious. Like Trevor Lawrence, I think the last couple of weeks, taken some steps forward where you say, okay, he's improving. But that defense, you just cannot stop anybody.
Yeah, they're a long way from Saxonville in 2017, the team that took them to the AFC Championship. And, that happens when you completely rip down to the studs a team. You have Miles Jack, and that's it. I mean, they traded C.J. Henderson away to Carolina in the last week, the last 10 days or so, and he was a former first-round pick of them, cornerback at the University of Florida. So I'm not sure exactly what they're doing there. I've seen some life from the offense. James Robinson's been fantastic in the last 2 weeks. You saw a Dan Arnold sighting. He led the team in receptions and yards this week, and they got him in the C.J. Henderson deal. There's weapons that I like on this team offensively, but they have to stop making mistakes. And as you pointed to, the defense, they might have to do what the Panthers did a couple drafts ago. And this entire upcoming draft, every single pick might need to be a defensive player. I mean, they just have to redo everything that's going on there. And ultimately, we'll talk about this more. I just don't think Urban Meyer is going to be there very long term. Even regardless of what happened, I think he's way over his skis in terms of coaching professional football. But that's just me. Probably the game of the week, and I'd say definitely an early contender for game of the season, is the Cleveland Browns went over across the way to Los Angeles to SoFi Stadium, and they played the Chargers. What a titanic matchup this was, Bri. A back-and-forth shootout where there was sort of some defense, but not really. I mean, this was just an offensive showcase for both teams. Just making all the plays, Njoku. I was wondering this past week, where the hell has David Njoku been? I know he's been a little bit banged up, but we got a little bit of a sighting for him. He played fantastic. Mm-hmm. This running game for Cleveland is definitely, I'd say, top 2 or 3. Arizona, Baltimore, them. It's somewhere in there. And Baker actually played a really good game. Herbert, though, was just a little bit better, Bri. I mean, what'd you make of this fantastic game?
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly a wild game. There were big offensive performances all over the place. Certainly a fantasy-friendly game, if you will. But the running game of the Browns, that two-headed monster that they have with Chubb and then with Hunt, I think the two of them just work perfectly. Chubb runs between the 20s, and then they have Hunt as the goal line guy who seems to score a touchdown every week. Like, that's just a dynamic combination that they have there. And the Browns are, even though they lost this game, you have to come away impressed with playing the kind of game they did, especially offensively. I mean, defense certainly left a lot to be desired. Herbert, we know, is just a star. I mean, he's only going to get better. He just looks like an absolutely elite player at the position. But the one guy I think that deserves some love here for the Chargers is Austin Eckler. Yes. Because coming out of a Division II school as a college player, probably not very high expectations for him at the pro level, and he is like the linchpin of this offense, running the ball, catching it out of the backfield, scored multiple touchdowns today, had a key fumble, but still bounced back and made big plays late, and then I'm sure you saw the Browns threw him into the end zone so that their offense could get the ball back, so that was funny, but just what a player he has become. I think he's, along with Keenan Allen, we know what he can do, and Mike Williams, who there's just so many guys on this offense that are having huge years. Mike Williams, like when his career started, he thought he was going to be a big-time player, then kind of fizzled the last couple of years, but now with Herbert, he has just been a monster. Yeah.
Yeah, before this season, there was a lot of questions coming in. He kind of fit into that mold of a guy we talked about earlier, that Cordell Patterson. He looked like he was going to be an absolute bust, injury-prone, not making plays, dropping balls. And you clearly see they made a conscious effort over there to turn him around, turn his career around, and feed him the ball and give him some confidence. And he's been even more effective than Keenan Allen. Yeah, Keenan Allen's always there to make the plays when you need him to. The big plays, they had that huge 4th down that he caught on 4th and 7. He had another play later in the game that was huge. But Mike Williams has been eating it up. And as you said, Eckler just changes the whole offense. They've shown, with and without Herbert, they are just a different team when Eckler is not on the field and when he is on the field. He just is their do-anything guy. And let's not discount, he's a fantastic blocker out of the backfield. Like, he just does everything. And, the whole offseason they talked about, how much he could leg press, and for a smaller guy, he's incredibly strong. You see that week in and week out on the goal line. He just is able to push the pile, notwithstanding when the Browns are pulling him into the end zone, as you said, which was maybe the most hilarious moment of the weekend. But I would say impressive from both sides. And, hey, you know what, Cleveland? Cleveland, you played well. Your 2 losses are to the Chiefs and the Chargers. You have nothing to be ashamed about there. And they have a ton of injuries on this team that are mounting. They lost Jack Conklin, their right tackle, in this game as well. He went down. They had the injury to OBJ. Now he's back, but when he comes back, they lose Jarvis. They've had some injuries with Njoku. He comes back today. The back end of that secondary has been hurt. So they ultimately have to focus on getting healthy and maybe playing a little bit of the easier teams here coming into their schedule. But an all-time classic, really, and that was fun to watch and definitely fantasy-friendly, as you said. Going to Las Vegas and the Bears, with the first time that the rookie QB in Justin Fields is starting for them and is also declared as the going-forward starter, like he's the guy. They finally said it. He doesn't have to do anything special in this game, but he didn't make any of the key mistakes. And the Raiders, being the Raiders, you start off 3-0, you get 2 overtime wins, and then have just been duds the last 2 weeks. I mean, at home, you score 9 points? You score 9 points against the Bears, who have been getting torched and owned all season long, and their offense wasn't crazy impressive. 6 of those 9 points were in the fourth quarter. I mean, I just don't understand the Raiders, and I don't understand why, maybe as I said earlier, it was a dark cloud of the John Gruden stuff, which we'll talk more about that on Wednesday, of kind of threw them off. I kind of had a feeling that would happen. That's why I kind of stayed away from any Raider players this week in fantasy, but I still didn't expect them to drop the dud that they did, and they're just a disappointment week in and week out that they cannot be consistent. So I don't give the Bears that many props because I just really think Nagy and Ryan Pace are done after this season, but it's nice for Justin Fields to get a win. I'm proud of him. I think he is the future, obviously, going forward. I really have high hopes for him, but the story is just the Raiders are just going back to the Raiders even a lot earlier in the season than they normally fall apart.
Yeah, and it's like they're another team with the Broncos where they start 3-0, and you're thinking, oh, the Raiders 3-0, and now the last 2 weeks, and last week against the Chargers on the Monday night, kind of similar games where the offense just doesn't produce. I think we kind of got a little ahead of ourselves. I'm not saying us in particular, but NFL fans with, Derek Carr, this was going to be kind of like a redemption season for him, and kind of showing what he can do, and now the last 2 weeks it's like what's going on here. So certainly disappointing for the Raiders. And then for the Bears, at that first game that Fields played against the Browns, where I mean I think he just got sacked again while we were talking about it. What do you get sacked 8 times in that game? I mean, it was just absurd. Yeah, so it was like just putting a rookie quarterback in a terrible position, but the Bears have bounced back here and are playing better. So certainly a good win for them in a game where they didn't have David Montgomery, who's been a key to their offense, and I think was placed on IR, so he's going to be out for an extended period. Yeah, so that's a key loss. But this year, when you have a rookie quarterback, it's about developing him. I don't agree the way they've gone about it, where they started Dalton and then it was like kind of going back and forth. We're going back to Dalton. No, it's going to be Fields now. It's like when you do that, to me, you just don't have any credibility as an organization, which the Bears have struggled from that standpoint. But today, certainly a good performance on the road.
Yeah, I think the key to it is, first of all, they have to get Allen Robinson involved more. He is their by far stud player on that offense, and he's had a very quiet season, 4 catches, 32 yards in this game. But with Montgomery out, they were very scared that was going to be an ACL injury last week, and he was out for the year. Thankfully, it was only an MCL sprain, so he's going to be out maybe about a month or so, but the key to this game is they have a guy named Khalil Herbert. Never heard of that guy. He rushed for 18 for 75 yards. Damian Williams, the former Chief, rushed 16 for 64. That's what you're going to need when you have a young rookie quarterback. And the other scary moment in this game was Derek Carr. I don't know if you saw this. He kind of got hit in the head by Roquan Smith, and good old Nathan Peterman sighting came into the game there, early in the fourth quarter. But ultimately, Derek Carr was able to come back in. So we'll have to watch what happens with the Raiders in a very tough division, as they seem to be slipping a lot earlier than they normally do. But, hey, I don't know. I don't think John Gruden is on the hot seat coaching-wise. I think he's on the hot seat, as we'll talk to on Wednesday, about what's going on there off the field. I think Mike Mayock is the guy that is going to be on the hook if this team does not perform on the field as the GM there. So interesting moments to watch there in Las Vegas. And I also don't know if you saw the other weird thing that I didn't know, where like outside of Las Vegas Stadium, the Allegiant Stadium, there's a big board that you could watch like that's near the highway, all the live plays going on in Raider games. I just, as a side note, I don't think that's really safe for drivers to be being misdirected to looking at a big board of the game as they're supposed to be keeping their eyes on the road. I don't know about that, but I thought that was an interesting point they made during the game. That's odd. The Arizona Cardinals, we go to Arizona and San Fran and Arizona. It seems like when these two teams, Bri, get together, I don't remember a few years ago, if you remember, they played that Sunday night game where it was like 9-6 into like overtime. There seems to always be gritty, hard-fought defensive battles, like offensive struggles for these two teams when they play each other. But ultimately, the Cardinals stay undefeated, the only undefeated team in football still. They win 17-10. Trey Lance was getting his first career start with Jimmy Garoppolo out with the calf injury. I thought he played okay. I thought he had some moments there, particularly with his legs. But the Cardinals, they didn't show it as much offensively in this game. They showed it defensively, and they, dare I say, are the best team in football right now. Not even just record-wise. I think they're showcasing it on both sides of the ball, Bri.
Yeah, they're certainly making the case, and I think it's the sign of a good team when you can win multiple kind of ways, where it doesn't always have to be Kyler Murray slinging it around, scoring 35 plus points, where they have a game like today where they grind it out against a tough defense, and that 49er defense can get after you, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
So you're going to have to slug it out with them, and to win the kind of game they did, where their offense wasn't at their crispest, but when they needed to make a play, Kyler Murray did, finding DeAndre Hopkins there for a key touchdown, another big play before the touchdown. He's going to be the go-to guy any week, and I just thought it was impressive the way they won, where they didn't have to light it up offensively and kind of got a grind it out type victory.
Yeah, they're good. They had that key fourth down stop where Trey Lance has a wide open man and J.J. Watt kind of came up and had the ball hit his arm. They just made the plays that they needed to make. And, I have high regard for Trey Lance. I honestly think when it's all said and done, given his situation and the talent that he has, I think he could end up kind of being the best QB out of this current class going on right now. You have to remember, he played one game last season with the pandemic there at North Dakota State, so he's really trying to get in the mix of it, learning Kyle Shanahan's offense. They have a ton of injuries, as they seem to always do in San Francisco. But I thought he made some interesting plays, and this game could have really turned on its head. Remember, he was kept out at the goal line on 4th and goal. He was about 6 inches away from scoring, and Arizona's defense did a fantastic job stopping him on the right side of the field. So it was that close of a game that was made. It was a real defensive struggle, but the other thing I think we need to take away on the Arizona side is Rondale Moore, that rookie out of Purdue. He might be their straight up, we know what Hopkins can do, but he might be their most dangerous weapon. He's getting better week in and week out of the backfield, running it and catching it. And then, Bri, they might have lost Max Williams, their really good tight end. He went out with an ugly knee injury where it bent away. It's not supposed to bend. It was just kind of how the helmet hit it. It wasn't on purpose, but he was carted off. That looked really bad. We'll have to keep an eye on that injury report going forward this week, but an impressive win, I would say, for Arizona.
Yeah, and that team has a lot of weapons. I like that it's a mix of veterans and young guys, where you have Hopkins, you have AJ Green, but then you have Rondale Moore and Christian Kirk. So they've got a lot of ways they can beat you, and Kyler Murray's only getting better as a passer, which is scary.
Yeah, and Chase Edmonds and James Conner rushing for his 5th touchdown today. There's a lot to like about that team. The final 4:25 game was the Giants visited the Cowboys. And you know what? The score of this is lopsided, right? It's 44-20. But that's really not the story for me, Bri, because the Giants were in this game, and they were really giving the Cowboys a fight, as they seem to do, particularly in Dallas. But when you have your QB and your star running back both leave the game. One to some kind of ankle injury where he kind of got rolled up on, kind of a freak injury there for Saquon. They end up carting him off. We don't know the state of how bad that's going to be. He seems to be hurt week in and week out, always is injured. We know that offensive line is not good there in New York. And then Daniel Jones got a nasty concussion / kind of neck injury there we'll have to keep an eye on as well. That was a very scary moment there at the goal line. Mike Glennon comes in and, he's Mike Glennon, Bry. Like we kind of know at this point in his career what we're going to expect. And the Cowboys just ran away with it in the second half. And you know what? If it wasn't thought of before, I know they haven't played the greatest competition in the world, Bry, but this Cowboys team needs to be seriously taken as a contender here in the NFC.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've been so impressed with the Cowboys. And the thing is, so many years you come in with the Cowboys and there's high expectations, and you look at their team and it's talented on paper. And how often do they underachieve and finish 8-8 or worse? It's just like same old Cowboys. Well, this year is just different. And I know it's still early in the season, but what we've seen from this team, they have very few weaknesses. I mean, they are just playing lights out. And the way Dak Prescott is playing coming off that injury against the Giants last year, for him to come back and be playing the way he is nothing short of extraordinary.
It's amazing.
And the amount of weapons that they have on offense, they are a well-oiled machine with the way they're running the ball using two running backs, not only relying on Ezekiel Elliott, but incorporating Pollard, who is like leading the league in yards per carry. So he's adding another dimension to the offense. And then, it's not receiver-wise just feeding Cooper or feeding CeeDee Lamb. Like, they're doing a great job of spreading it around, using the tight ends in the middle of the field.
Schultz.
Yeah, Schultz and Jarwin. CeeDee Lamb caught a bomb for a touchdown today. Cooper, is going to get his. So defense they're playing, especially the corner Diggs, who has, 5 interceptions already. To me, they are playing outstanding football, and I totally agree with you. Have to absolutely be taken seriously, which is a different story for the Cowboys because perennially they're a team that, to me, underachieves their talent. This year, it really looks different.
Yeah, it really looks good. The division, I think, is even a little bit worse than I think we both thought, particularly what I thought out of Washington, at least. And they cut, Jalen Smith this past week. He made a Pro Bowl for them, but ultimately he was a guy that he seemed kind of like he needed to change his scenery. He was getting, comically blown up on Twitter how many times he was lost in coverage and on run plays where he seemed to not know what was going on and what gap he needed to be covering. He ended up getting ultimately signed in a little bit of a bidding war with the Green Bay Packers, and he's been a durable player. He's a tackle machine. So we'll see what he does over in Green Bay. But that linebacker room, as we talked to going into the season, was very, very full. I just didn't think they expected Micah Parsons to be as impactful as he's been this season. And with him and Van Der Esch still being there, they have Neal sliding down into that linebacker position. They're loaded top to bottom on this team. I'm still not a huge fan of their safeties, but they're making enough plays there. And when they get DeMarcus Lawrence back, I think they're going to even be scarier. So you have to seriously take this team going forward in the season. And Zeke, he had a moment there. It got a little bit scary. He was kind of holding his back. It looked like he might be hurt too, but I think he ended up falling on kind of the pylon, the pole of it. That's kind of what hit his back. He came right back in and caught a high step in receiving touchdown, and he walked right in as well. So the Cowboys are going to be a threat, and if you haven't paid attention to them, if you're an NFL fan listening out there, you need to start because they're for real.
Yeah, and just one final thought from the Giants' perspective. I mean, the one takeaway, albeit with the ugly ending, as I'm sure everybody saw with the rookie wide receiver Kadarius Toney, really just a coming out party for him. I mean, he was making plays all over the place. You wonder why he wasn't dressed for the first couple games of the season, not even on the field.
Don't you?
Yeah, and now you watch him, and he's quickly become Daniel Jones' favorite target, although now it's going to be Glennon, as we talked about. But then the ugly scene there at the end of the game where the game is out of reach, and he makes a play and throws a punch and gets ejected. You just don't want to see that. Obviously, Joe Judge was incensed by the whole thing. That's not the kind of thing that is going to fly with a guy like him. But the positive was that the Giants look like they have a big-time weapon at wide receiver who could potentially be a game breaker, I think, with the ability he showed.
Yeah, he's a player I know very well coming out of the University of Florida. What him and Kyle Pitts were able to do in the last couple seasons was impressive. But hey, with a guy like Joe Judge, as you said, he might find himself right back in the doghouse if they get Golladay back. We don't know the status of him. He got injured in this game. They're still waiting on Sterling and Slayton to kind of get back into the groove here. So there's a lot of injuries mounting for the Giants. And, to have in your fifth game of your NFL career, your young NFL career, a career amazing game, to end it like that was just poor judgment on his part. You need to expect better from him as a professional, but the Giants they're just a disappointing team as always, it seems, in the last few years, and they're floating around. I ultimately don't know what's going to really end up happening with them. Yeah, okay. So Brian, moving over to the Sunday night game that just wrapped up here before we started recording because of the delay they had with lightning for almost about an hour. The Buffalo Bills went into Kansas City, into Arrowhead. And this is kind of a revenge game that people shaped this up to be. It's a rematch of the AFC Championship where it was close early on. Buffalo had the lead, if you don't remember. And then the Chiefs really dominated and went on a massive run there to end that game. And so, remember, the Chiefs beat the Bills. I look back at it, week 6 of last season. And it just seems that every time, particularly these two teams play, Buffalo, yes, but these two teams play in recent years, it always seems to pour. I don't know if you've noticed that it just like last season of week 6, it was raining, an absolute downpour. This game in the second half was an absolute downpour. It just seems to be a lot of bad weather games from these two teams. Buffalo wins 38-20. And I guess the first thing that we talked about early on when we started the podcast this week is the officiating. And I think besides the Ram game with the punt issue, this game was laughable in terms of officiating. The amount of ticky-tack calls, every single thing that was called one way or the other, that just let them play, ref. Let them play, and it cost massive plays for both teams, particularly the Chiefs run the end of a lot of questionable calls. I mean, what did you think of the officiating tonight, which was drastically not only hurting the game, but was slowing it down?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I felt like it made this game unwatchable at times, and I was really excited to watch this one. Going in, thought it was going to be just a tremendous game, and obviously it turned out to be a lot more lopsided than anyone could have thought. But yeah, I mean, the calls, and you can't just say they were against the Chiefs because they were against both teams. It was just, as Al Michaels said on the broadcast, it was another June 14th Flag Day, which I thought was a great line by him. But when you go to the game itself, I mean, this was an eye-opening performance, I think, on both ends. You can look at it from the Bills' perspective and say, wow, what a job they did defensively, because have we ever seen the Chiefs' offense with Patrick Mahomes perform the way it did today? Like, they were completely out of sync. I mean, when the ball was on target, it was being dropped by Tyreek Hill. But Mahomes was off. He looked shaky to me in the pocket. Like, this was a game that would be very alarming if I were a Chief fan. Now, I wouldn't be at the point where I would panic about the Chiefs. Like, I could certainly see them bouncing back next week and their offense puts up 30 plus and you don't think about this one. But for this game tonight, when they were at home against a marquee team like that, to get shut down, you don't see that offense play the way they did today. I thought, what a performance that the Bills put together. The defensive game plan was just executed to perfection.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That's exactly the story. Because to be honest, the Bills made some plays, but it was really the big plays. I mean, you look at Allen, 15 for 26, 15 completions, and he had 315 yards. I mean, it's just you don't see things like that. And it was just, he was bombing it left and right. He was great with his legs, especially in that first drive. 11 carries, 59 yards, and a touchdown. Look at Knox, another weapon there at tight end. He goes 3 for 117 at a touchdown. Diggs, he only had 2 catches all game, but 2 for 69.
Mm-hmm.
Moss had 3 for 55. Emmanuel only had 3 catches, but 54 yards and 2 touchdowns. That was the story of the game. And I would say, besides the flags, that defense is look impressive. They retooled it a little bit with the Bills there in the offseason of adding pass rushers. They added Gregory Rousseau there in the first round. He had a sack tonight as well. I think they just have, they highlighted it on the broadcast, about 9 different defensive linemen are kind of rotating in for the Bills. That was their weakness in the last couple of years. I think that has looked overly impressive. Their secondary, I've always really liked, particularly Tre'Davious White. I think he is a really fantastic corner, one of the top kind of guys in the league. But yeah, if I'm a Chiefs fan, Bri, I'm hitting the panic button. This is something. This is not something to scoff about anymore, Bri. We're in week 5, and I know that the Broncos and the Raiders kind of came back to earth, but the Chargers came into Arrowhead here and just won a couple weeks ago. Now you have another AFC power in the Buffalo Bills walk right into your home stadium and dominate you on Sunday Night Football in front of the whole world. And Mahomes looks really bad. And you know what? You can't even go, oh, it's the offensive line. This offensive line has played really well. It really has played well this season. It's just he is off with his passes. And you know what? I think it comes down to, Bri, ever since Tampa Bay kind of played that like Tampa 2, too high safety shell coverage in the Super Bowl, they kind of gave a roadmap to every defense in this league. Hey, if you could contain some of these big plays, the Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce big shots, this team will ultimately end up making key mistakes, and they have been extremely turnover prone. We've seen, another 3 turnovers tonight from the Chiefs? It's inexcusable for an offense of their caliber. And I'm hitting the panic button, Bri. I'm getting concerned when I'm seeing in Kansas City.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm at the panic point. I would say definitely concern. And the fact that Mahomes already has as many interceptions this year as he did all of last year, I think that says a lot. And the offense, like when you watch them, they're just not striking the same fear.
No.
And I think part of it is they don't have a running game that they're relying on. Like in the past, you had the running game, and then that would set up all the big plays to Hill and to Kelce and on and on. They're not even trying to run the ball. And then, by the way, they lose Edwards-Helaire in this game to a knee injury.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like he's had a very good year, but their offense just doesn't have the same dynamic quality that we're so used to seeing from them, and that, to me, is a big problem.
No, it absolutely is. I mean, as I said, the offensive line has played great this season. They need a run game desperately. I mean, man, could they use a Kareem Hunt right now, right? And it's just, It's killing them. It's becoming too Mahomes-centric. He should not be throwing 54 passes in the rain. That pick 6 to Tyreek was not his fault at all. Tyreek's got to catch that. He kind of threw it right in the hands there of Buffalo. What was that? Hyde, I believe, is the one that ended up ultimately picking that up. It was him, right? That ran back for the pick 6, but I don't know. I'm concerned, Bri. I really am concerned. And the final point there on that defense has been nothing short of absolutely horrifically atrocious. I mean, they are bad. They are really bad. And they showed a stat during the game: 29 plus points they've given up in 5 straight games to open the season. They're tied for the NFL record of teams doing that. One more game like that, which they could have next week the way they're playing, and they break an NFL record to start a season. They've been horrific. Steve Spagnuolo, whether his fault or not, I don't think it's as much his fault, is on the hot seat. I just don't think they have a lot of players. Chris Jones didn't play tonight as well. They need players outside of Jones and Honey Badger to do something, and they're not making the plays. I don't really know what it is. I think it's honestly just a lack of skill on that side of the field, and it's been a lack of solid drafting really on the defensive spot because, as you know, when you have all those offensive weapons and you have to pay them, you have a limit on your amount of cap money. Well, that means you got to hit on more defensive draft picks, and they just haven't done it. So I'm panicking over there in KC because while I think that team's still going to make the playoffs, we hold the Kansas City Chiefs to a higher standard to get to AFC Championships, Super Bowls, and win Super Bowls. They look nothing like a team that's going to be able to do that through the first 5 weeks. And so that's
I don't know. I agree. I agree. And the thing is, with the defensive struggles, is you're so used to them being able to easily overcome them because, the offense is just going to put up 35, 40 on a weekly basis. But if their offense is going to play like it did today, I mean, that really becomes a problem. So
Yep.
it bears watching. Next week will be a big key because they're going against a team that certainly has talent on defense, and Washington hasn't really put it all together this year, but a team that can get after the quarterback. If they get after Mahomes and somehow upset the Chiefs in that game, then I'll be honest with you, I'm hitting the panic button for real.
All right,
But
so
we'll see what happens.
we'll check in with you next week on that one.
Yeah.
We're gonna go preview the final segment here on the podcast tonight. We're going to preview the Monday night game, which is tomorrow in M&T Bank Stadium over in Baltimore. The Indianapolis Colts coming in 1-3. Go visit the Baltimore Ravens at 3-1. Lamar Jackson 7-0 in October games. The only QB since 1970 with 5+ starts at least under his belt that has not lost a single time in October. He is Mr. October, dare I say. He owns this month here in Baltimore. And for me, I'm picking the Baltimore Ravens, Brian. I know a lot of people have kind of been selling the stock on the Ravens. I know they've played a couple ugly, gritty games. They've had some injuries, but they've pulled some good ones out too against the Lions, against the Chiefs. This running game is absolutely lethal. For me, it's probably the best running team in football. I know there was the whole controversy last week of them going for it at the end of the game against Denver to make sure they keep the record of 100+ rushing yards in like 3 straight seasons, like dating back to 3 seasons ago, which is incredibly impressive. I totally agree with them going for the record. I don't think that was poor sportsmanship at all. But a team in Indy that they got some injuries. Wentz has been unimpressive. The team has been unimpressive. I think it's going to be closer than people think. Right now, the line is about 7 points. So I would kind of take the points in the Colts at the moment, but I still think the Ravens are going to end up pulling this out here on Monday night.
Yeah, I take the Ravens. I think it's going to be a little more convincing than you do, just because the Colts, yeah, they had a good win there against Miami in a game where probably most people thought Miami would win, but overall, this Colts team, it's like, what is the identity of this team? I think at the time we thought the Carson Wentz trade went down, that it would be a good change of scenery for him getting out of Philadelphia, getting a fresh start on a team that looked like it was on the rise, but it's just not going well there. I just don't like what I've seen from the Colts overall. We know they don't have all their weapons on offense. Hilton hasn't played at all this year, but I just think the Ravens at home, even with the injuries that they've had, I think they're going to put together a big performance here. Lamar Jackson and company, and Hollywood Brown, when it seems like he makes the more difficult plays, and then when he has an easy catch, he drops it, but then he can make circus catches. So he's been kind of a weird player, but certainly big playability. And I think the Ravens are going to roll at home tomorrow night.
Yeah, Colts right now, 31st in offense. They're second to last in the entire NFL. They're 30th in passing, 25th in rushing. They really haven't done anything well, especially in the offensive side of the ball. And, I know they have a lot of injuries to the offensive line, particularly Quentin Nelson has been really banged up all year long. But you still expect more out of them and a Frank Reich coach team. And every week you go into it, you wonder more and more, are they going to try to get out of this Wentz contract at the end of the year and go in a different direction, because it's getting ugly in Indianapolis. But hey, the only thing Indianapolis has going for them, Bri, is that even though if they drop this game and drop to 1-4, they still are nowhere near out of it in that horrific AFC South. They just got to beat the Titans a couple times.
That's a good point.
Beat them another time, after they just lost to them recently last week. But they could be right back in it, because the Titans are not a team really to trust right now either. So we'll see what happens. And I expect it to be a little bit closer than you do, but I think the Ravens are an underrated team right now, and I think they're really going to show out for what they could do here on Monday Night Football. But guys, that's going to wrap up First and 10, the NFL football podcast here on Clueless Gamers. Thank you so much for listening. If you've listened this far, we greatly appreciate you, because we know it's been a long one as we were recapping everyone. Timestamps, as always, are going to be down below. It's every game we talked about, when we talked about it, what our concerns and praises are that are going on, and previewing the Monday night game we did. So let us know your thoughts on what you think the Monday night game is going to end up turning out to be, and what you thought through the first 5 weeks of the NFL season. if you didn't get enough of us, if you're not sick of hearing enough of us and haven't been tired and bored of us yet, we'll be back on Wednesday where we're going to record all of our picks for Week 6 rolling into that, and that will probably be up somewhere on Thursday or Friday, that edition, so look out for the channel for that. Bri, thank you as always for joining me on this late hour here on Sunday night, technically early Monday morning. I greatly appreciate it.
Yes, it was a lot of fun, and I think it's about time to get to bed.
Yeah, I think it's about time to wrap it up for us. Brian and I's socials, our Twitters, will be linked down below. So if you want to see us complain about our favorite teams or any other wacky moments in the NFL, we're definitely, I think, dare I say, a good follow. So give us a little bit of a follow there. We'll greatly appreciate it, guys. Guys, I love you all. I'll talk to you down below. And until next 1st and 10, thanks for listening.